Ladies and gentlemen, please kindly take your seats. Welcome to this roundtable, which will focus on the new model of heat supply, which is proposed in this nation. I am Stepan Solzhenitsyn. I am senior partner with McKinsey, and I head our activities in the generation and electricity supply domain. We have here a very high level of representation from this industry, a versatile one. Let us not introduce each one of the members of the panel. I will do that as we progress with the discussion. And let us give the floor to the Minister of Energy of the Russian Federation, Alexander Novak. Thank you. To start with, distinguished colleagues, I would like to express my gratitude to all the participants of this panel discussion who kindly agreed to discuss those important topics here today. To be honest, that is a very intricate issue, the new model of heat supply market. We have been discussing it for years, and this kind of composition of the panel, including governors, presidents of Russian constituencies, representatives of the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service, is very useful to discuss the general situation now in the heat supply market and measures and steps we are to take in order to improve the situation. I have prepared a small presentation, and I would like to take some 10 minutes of your time to outline the issues and the proposals which are generated in connection with the same. We appreciate that there is no need to prove that cogeneration is the best option we have today. In the Soviet days, it used to be quite successful. In the European nations, it is put to work quite efficiently as well, especially in the Nordic countries such as Sweden, Norway, Finland, where climate conditions are in many ways similar to those in Russia, and the share of cogeneration in those nations might be as high as 100%. Unfortunately, here, ever since 1990, we declined in terms of the share of the cogeneration, and the input into the centralized heating system from those fell by the factor of 2. Generation capacities are using only 30% of their capacity, and the number of small boilers, which are local, has grown by 20% in 10 years, and gas-fired generation of heat increased by the factor of 1.5. As the result, we use more fuel than we could have used, and here are the figures: 25% of boilers and 36% of turbines are basically worn out. Heat loss is much more than in the nations which are using cogeneration. Investments in the industry are quite low, some 40 billion rubles per year, whereas the need is about 6 times higher, close to 250 billion per year. That means to say that over the decade, we need to put in 2.5 trillion rubles to reverse the situation associated with the wear and obsolescence of generation assets and to increase efficiency. Why? The outdated system of regulation, from our point of view, is at fault. An inefficient model of relations of marketplace and industry. In recent times, major steps have been done and decisions made, such as switching to long-term tariff formation, but that doesn't resolve the issue, because there are certain flaws with that approach too, which prohibit investments to flow in. In other words, tariffs are made based on the system of costs plus, and we appreciate that there is a great gap between the regions, municipalities, in terms of tariff formation, because in essence, indexation of the level of costs is exactly what's being done. Tariffs could be adjusted on the annual basis based on the current legislation, despite the fact that those are long-term in essence. And we see that there is still cross-subsidies, cross-links between heat supply and electricity supply, which is now some 26 billion rubles. Federal executive bodies have come up with certain proposals based on their analysis exercise of the market. And I will outline the key ones of those. From our point of view, the new model should be useful to foster the development of efficient generation sources with clear investment sources, and should be based, emphasize that, on long-term agreements with investors, solid investors. If we look into the electricity generation segment, this model has been adopted, the so-called agreements of capacity supply, which put in some $35 billion of investments into the segment, and we have done the upgrading of the key generation assets tremendously. And to implement the new model in the heat supply market, a set of measures are being proposed. Key ones of those are two: the appointment of the unified heat supply organization with respect to every system of heat supply. In essence, that means high responsibility and regrouping of functions. And the key point is adopting different approaches to pricing, which is twofold: setting the price for consumers, while capping it basically with a limitation based on the price of an alternative boiler, and liberalization of relations between the grid and the generation. Let me throw in some more details about those. We appreciate that the core of the model is the unified source of responsibility in every system of centralized heat supply. And this ETO entity, as we refer to it, should become the center for technical regulations, responsible for dependency and quality of heat supply, commercial dispatching operator. That means putting the load on the most efficient generation capacities and doing the reverse with respect to non-efficient, and to guarantee long-term development programs, because there will be long-term investment agreements that would provide stimuli for further developments, enhance efficiency, sustain the balance of interests between generators, grids, and consumers. And the competition for that will be in the form of the so-called alternative boiler as the source of supply. That is, how much would it cost for consumers to switch to those, and that will be opposed to the direct heat supply from the central grid. That would enhance the responsibility of suppliers for quality and dependency of heat supply. If the organization which does that fails to comply with those requirements, a straightforward process of imposing fines and penalties will be used, which would be comparable in terms of sums to the practices common for the electricity supply. So ETOs will be very much interested in performing in accordance with their obligations to the customers. And the key point I mentioned briefly, which is core for the new model, that is changing the approach to pricing. The new model of means that relations between prices and pricing will be based on contracts. The consumers will be protected by the capped price set by the regional authorities, and it will depend not only on the costs but on the alternative heat supply costs, which a consumer can opt for in a particular territory. And we have termed it the price of the alternative boiler in every system of centralized heat supply. It is believed that price parameters will be differentiated by the type of fuel, climate, seismic situation, and the density of buildings layout. It would take into account the operational costs and the capex based on the norms, and the margins common for the market. We have done the calculations which are average for the nation, and now we're doing the math via the specialized technical consultancy, assessing the best practice technology for making this happen in every particular region. That would mean that market players would strive for cost cutting, and investments will flow from commercial organizations and, for instance, pension funds, and the use of project finance will be one of the options. That is how the price of the alternative boiler is set. Analysis demonstrates that the gap versus those prices and current tariffs is quite large. For the most part, in the regions, in the constituencies, the boiler heat supply price is higher than the centralized heat supply, even though there are some regions which are above that bar. So it is believed that there will be gradual switch to the price of the alternative boiler as the heat supply in the course of some 10 years, with the parameters in the regions where the tariffs are lower than that figure, with the indexation equal to the inflation rate plus 1 or 2%. And in the regions which are already higher than that, there will be the freeze of tariffs exercise, and those parameters will be achieved in the course of several years. As I said, it is believed that the certain actions will be different from region to region based on the calculations. That is the slide about the role of local authorities and regional authorities. It will be key because setting the tariffs and capping the tariffs will be the exercise done by the entities, constituencies of the Russian Federation. Coordination of the model will also involve municipalities, which will sign contracts and identify the unified heat supply organization. There will be a municipal control exerted over the performance of investment programs, which will be approved, among others, by municipalities. From our point of view, it will afford efficient and effective control over the process. Regional and local authorities will be participating in the control and management activities. And those are the benefits and outputs of this target model for the state, for investors, for generators, and for consumers. Without a doubt, key points in this kind of relations include the influx of private investments, developing of adjacent industries, enhancing the degree of manageability of heat supply. And for investors, it is key to mitigate the risks of investing into the segment, which are at the moment quite high with the current model. Longer term, level playing field will attract resources into this segment. For energy generators, this will mean alleviation of administrative pressure and enhancement of economic motivating factors. And for consumers, there will be higher efficiency, more comfort, greater quality, and alleviation of the load in the market of heat energy supply. The budget will get incremental 800 billion additional taxes, which will be way above the subsidies which are allocated now to offset the price climb for heat energy for private customers. And we will introduce more order into the heat energy market. Now the draft law is with the State Duma. It is believed that prior to the 1st of January of 2019, pilot regions which would want to participate in the model will switch to relevant changed practices which I've mentioned, and the government of the Russian Federation will study and scrutinize the experience thus accumulated, and since the 1st of January of 2019, all the constituencies of Russia will be offered such an opportunity to switch to the new model. So this is the kind of soft structure and methods we are thinking about now. It provides the opportunity to start at least with something and then to propagate this model should it prove efficient and really bring in investments and achieve greater controls over the quality of services. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you so much. It is great to understand what we're talking about next. Some clarification about the deadlines. Was it 2019? Well, if the new State Duma adopts this law in the autumn session, then pilots might kick off as soon as the 1st of January next year. For us, it is a great honor that the President of the Republic of Tatarstan has found a couple of minutes to be with us here. So President Minikhanov is head of one of the republics, which in many ways is leading in many of the projects and many of the areas. Over to you, Your Excellency. The condition of heat supply in the Republic is stable and sustainable. We do a lot in terms of upgrading and renovation, modernizing heat supply sources, implementing up-to-date management technology, and putting to work energy-efficient materials and measures. In the capital of the Republic, we have been running the new model of using of heat supply sources. Our cogeneration stations are enhancing their capacities, putting in more power, and the current system achieves 100% payments for the product delivered to the customers with a good level of reliability and reasonable level of expenses for maintaining the quality and efficient system of heat supply. That is based on the use of automated points of adjustment of adjustment of heat supply based on the weather conditions and the current temperature ranges. We have proved that efficient in Naberezhny Chelny city, where the buildings are 100% fitted with automated individual heat points. The outcome of this exercise was savings of 17% of heat requirements, optimized regimes, decreased losses in the grid, and the quality of adjustment of heating parameters improved, and we can now switch on and switch off heat supply with respect to any standalone building. And the customers now have the system at hand to save the resources and to vary their bill for heat supply. This will be beneficial because the yards and territories near living quarters will be freed from cumbersome equipment.
The work in Kazan started back in 2012. Now, the automated facilities in the capital of Tatarstan, we have about 24% and release of heat. And all in all, in this program covers for 2013-2020 as many as 30 modular heat generating facilities were generated, and 3 were upgraded. The results of operations indicated the bringing down the consumption by 20% and the hot water by 27%. It is required to work with 1,400 facilities, and the budget of 3.4 billion rubles is required. Automated heat generation facilities would require upgrading heat supply networks to replace outdated pipes, and 11 billion rubles will be required to do that. The proposals of the Minister of Power, the new model of heat supply market, the alternative boiler, as they say, dub it, stimulate the work that's underway in Kazakhstan. At the same time, I'd like to draw attention to the comprehensive bringing the heat supply to automated control mode, which requires upgrading the in-house heating systems. This requires use of projects through funding the project through funding federal funding, and this facility is available. This mechanism is operating, and defining this work scope is a good thing, and we are ready to join the pilot project. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. and for readiness to work. If you need to attend another session, we'd like to extend to you special thanks. And I would like Mr. Reshevsky to fill this vacant chair, and as a representative of business, at the same time investor. So, Vladimir, the question for you. You've just heard a description of the status of the industry through the country. The ministry gave us this outline. You heard the standpoint of the president of Tatarstan, and from the standpoint of business and where you are working in Siberia, how it looks there on the regional level, and to what extent the proposal of the ministry are meeting those challenges that we are facing. Thank you very much. I'm working with the Siberian Generating Company. We work in 5 regions, and the issues and challenges there are much more challenging than in Sochi, where it's warmer here, and as many as 3 million people should be supplied with heat. And we're familiar with the issues that were mentioned by Mr. Novak. So in Tatarstan, the network is outdated and degrading, and the demand is increasing, and the power supply is not meeting the standards, and loss is high, and the communal issues are #1 for all Poles, and the government is responsible for all incidents in this area, and the strain according to the dealing with the communal issues, and the heat supply is just business losing profitability and not attractive, and this is quite surprising. This is true. 2 trillion rubles, about 2% of GDP, and the potential is even higher. But for 20 years, we were experiencing such situation, and 2 trillion rubles were underinvested over these 20 years. So if we start the right process to go to bring it to the path just reasonable and economical justified, it would be a very interesting mechanism to give an impetus to growth of the economy, and it would be this mechanism. The energy sector can provide it, and we model the situation. If we start to kick off the process right now, and if the regulation is right and just between the participants of the market and the government, and start investment process, so during next 10 years, due to cascading effect, and should be mentioned that we shouldn't replace import. So everything is here. We have everything, and the things are manufactured by Russian. And the growth in GDP can be anticipated 0.3%, only due to the fact that in this sector the relations will be just and correct, and the preconditions are there. And one precondition I'd like to draw attention to, which was mentioned by Mr. Novak. Over 7 years, we saw revolution in the industry. The responsible investors came to the industry, and all the companies that were set up at the basis of RAO-ES, SGK, and Ford, MNT Plus investors, and other companies. They proved their credibility, and they managed to invest 2 trillion rubles into more than 100 DPM projects, and they can take responsibility to bring private investors to invest into very complicated projects. All they need is the long-term system of relations. In this sector, you cannot develop plans having the regulatory forecast for 1 year. This is just laughable. And we lived through this for just 10 years. And the payback period takes 10 to 20 years, and we have to address the energy efficiency, delivery, logistics, everything. And we keep saying about that for quite a long time. And it's a bad thing that so far there's no the qualitative breakthrough. But I'm optimistic because over the last 3 years, the work has been done, the preparation work was done, and it was partially covered by the minister, and the majority of the schemes of supply heat have been developed. They are not perfect, but this is a very important move ahead, and we have to know what we're dealing with. And it's very important that the concept was coined down, and the move from the concept to bill which has been reviewed for once, which was argued on, and it was being brought into the parliament and development of bylaws. And as soon as the law is enacted, so the devil hides in detail, as you know. So all bills, all bylaw bills have been developed. And I would like to thank the minister and his team to say thank you for the ministry was carrying out this work despite all the issues. Mr. Dvorkovich held several meetings on this topic, and within the framework of the process of setting up the new norm base, regulatory base that we saw, I think we can hardly draw a parallel to this process where such a deep work through was done and such a deep analytic process were involved. So what's left? 2 steps to enact the law on the autumn session, and the second, after enacting the law within the just maximum number of regions to start implementing the system, and after the pilot stage to clone it over the whole country within the framework of those territories where it is prudent. These are big cities with centralized heat supply. Well, hurdles are also obvious. There are territories where the tariff is higher than alternative boiler plant tariff, but this target is higher. But the measures that have been thought through are the following. The transition period may take from 5 to 10 years, and subsidies to low-income families were discussed, the low efficiency, and we are speaking about the tariff increase. And for people, it's important how much they pay for the bill. They're just bringing down the consumption, which is a positive move. This will hinder the growth of the bill. So this is a rational approach to move to this model, and I'm resolute that if we implement this new model at the heat market in 5 to 10 years, we won't recognize this sector, and this regulation will result in the colossal macroeconomic result. If we fail, the sector will continue degrading. But we're optimistic, and we hope that starting with 2017, the process will underway. So if we fail to accept the system, and the systems continue degrading, and everybody will have to switch to this alternative boiler plant. And the proposal is to move in another area. Our experience shows that the engineering economic efficient system that were developed in the Soviet Union, which we have as a legacy, and only over the last 10 years, the countries that are facing these similar issues, they started considering the most important system. But we ruined the system for 20 years, despite the fact that others consider it the most promising. And we moved to the boiler plants, and the people were paying extra or even more if the system had been kept as it were during the Soviet Union time. So this is inevitable that we come to that. But on one hand, we might end up with having a very effective system and the domino principle, and we will just stimulate development of all industries. And on the other hand, we will end up with an irrational system, very high capacity, which is not demanded. So the restoring the unified chain, we increase the unified heat supply organization, and the integrator of the system comes into play. And the federal agencies have their own approach. And I'd like to ask the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service, Vitaly Korolov, your standpoint on how this integrator and who specifically should be determined, and how it will, what impact it will provide to competition at this market. Can you provide us your standpoint? Good morning. I'd like to say that the issue that we're discussing today is very topical, and we in the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service were supporting our colleagues who were maintaining that the law should be enacted on a speedy way, because it doesn't. Without this law, we cannot enact the bylaws, and part of them were enacted, the standard on but we wait for the law, although the bylaws were worked through in a pretty good way. So unified heat supply company, well, the precision that are the following: in big cities, the system of heat supply is endorsed by the ministry, and the minor settlements, the local authority. It's quite logical approach. And as for the unified heat supply company, the UHCS is not a legal entity to enter into the contracts. So the direct contracts can be executed with other, but there's a fork if we enact the law. If we say that UHCS should undertake the responsibility of guaranteed heat supply, similar to the power supply, and accounting for specificity of heat supply system, local and required for maintaining the living standard of people living in this territory, we have to just go past this fork. Whether it would be possible to engage into direct contracts with the rest of the heat supply systems, which will stay anyway, regardless of UHSC availability. So the unified heat supply company, well, we can follow both ways, accounting for the fact that the anti-monopoly methods can be applied, and as the minister said, just we can use the other tools to restrict the monopoly capacity of the company. But from organization standpoint, it would be good that it is unified, and each consumer can understand who is responsible in the chain of supply, and approach this company with complaints, suggestions, and we would be in a good position to see who is responsible. As for criteria, set forth to UHSC. Maybe it's worth to work for us jointly with the Ministry of Power, because there are arguments in several areas and constituencies how to select the UHSC. But this work on performing, because the basis is good. Thank you. I'd like to ask the representative of the Ministry of Economic Development the same topic, because we see several players in this area. For instance, we have UHSC, which is assigned other players, other owners, other boiler plants, of course the ministry and the regional municipal authority. Do you feel that we are ready to progress using this model, the new model? Does it match the requirements of the heat supply? And what the role should be assigned to various levels? Good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for giving floor to me at this session and answering your question. I think the model proposed is the only possible answer to those challenges that we are having right now and the issue that have been compiling for many years in the heat supply area. So for this reason, the Ministry of Economics is consistently supporting the initiative of the Ministry of Power and Energy on implementing the new model. But I'd like to shift the focus of this issue, and I'd like to rebrand this model from alternative boiler plant model into the model of ideal unified heat supplying company. Why? We are discussing this discussion, and we are rolling down to the point that the tariff should be increasing. And in my opinion, well, I disagree with that. I disagree that the tariff should increase or increase substantially, so the value of the reform is such that we are increasing the efficiency of heat supply system. We are setting up conditions for long-term tariff setting, and we are setting up conditions of bringing investors into the industry. So from this standpoint, the role of unified heat supply company as the core of the system should be a key one. So the whole engineering policy, the price setting,
so both the price setting and the concentration of the pricing center, and indeed high and monopolistic role of the ETO, which would be better regulated by FAS. All that would allow to enhance the efficiency of the system by factors, and this enhancement could be used to curb the possible prospects of tariff climb, and I assume that in this way we will not end up with higher tariffs. Looking back 15 years, tariffs increased by the factor of 25, whereas inflation was 500% over that period of time. Well, in terms of the degree of wear of the grid, it is getting even worse. We are now at the point when lack of action in this area, to my mind, is dangerous from the point of view of operating a normal system of heat supply for our customers and citizens. So we need to move on, and I guess there are no other ways. Another point I would like to emphasize is the phasing in exercise in terms of the system implementation. The macroeconomic and the global effects that we believed would be achieved as the result of implementation of the system include, first of all, long-term objective price and pricing, leveling out of prices and tariffs for heat supply in the nation, adjusting the system of responsibility, switching to one-stop shop philosophy, bringing in investments, major upgrading of generation assets and other fixed assets. All that will be very difficult to achieve should we proceed with a very long period of time for implementation. We have inter-regional heat supply organizations which are unlikely to function within various systems in terms of the business operations. So the Ministry of Economy would, of course, endorse the implementation of that system as rapidly as possible and with the maximum pilot constituencies involved. So what's your position? Well, it's clear that there will be pilot regions, but switching to the new model should be regulated and stipulated by relevant laws and legal acts. So what would you advise is best? Let it be done at municipalities and regional authorities, or what? In the government and before passing the documents to the State Duma, the position of the Ministry of Economy was that we were proponents of the unified application of this model in all the Russian constituencies. Now the government is championing the draft law version, which is about the phasing in exercise. So this was the decision of the government. Should I be an expert in the area, I would rather proceed with the centralized implementation of the model throughout the national territory. I would like to turn now to Mr. Rashevsky. Apparently, business should strive to make it as universal as possible and to make it happen as fast as possible. At least your business is supportive of the phasing in exercise. Are you not surprised that the law has already made it into the Duma with that phasing in approach? It's always a compromise with such documents, and the compromise which is based on the experience of adjacent industries. For instance, the decision to implement the model in a region or constituency should proceed upon the decision of the highest manager in the region, that is the governor, was made on the background of a heated discussion regarding commuting transportation. We believe that the model should be implemented to as wide as it is possible, but there is huge gap between the regions regarding the rate of tariffs, all things being equal, and that along with quite a few specific features of every constituency and every region, which we have to take into account, makes it problematic. And of course, the decision of the head of the region, supported by experts and by economic considerations in terms of the appointment of the ETO, is perhaps not possible to implement universally. We need some experience so that we can proceed with as rapid and as wide implementation as possible. We appreciate, and we do not doubt that the nation is facing a challenging situation as to the cost of money and availability of capital and investments generally and for specific industries. Even though we do not have them in the podium, but I would like to perhaps turn to external investors with the question, even though some might invest and others might not. Would this model be sufficient for you to make investments lucrative? I would like to ask Mr. Sizov of Leader to comment on that. Please take the mic. Thank you for this opportunity. We are institutional investors, and we share in terms, we share the point of view that there are two investors in terms of categories: institutional and operating investors. From the point of view of operators' business, it's clear tariffs are higher and the margin is higher, and this investment margin, investment markup, will be beneficial from infrastructural investments. From that point of view, the outcome of the law implementation is positive, well, even though the tariff climbs. As to institutional investors coming in, that's a separate issue I would like to focus upon. First of all, there's the question as to whether they have the money. As of today, in the system of state-run pension funds and insurance agencies, we have some 5 trillion rubles. So the money is there. Could the money make it into this industry? Well, today, lack of financial tools and lack of investment application of opportunities mean that pension funds and insurance companies are on the quest for identifying solid investment opportunities. Could we invest in the heat supply system? Yes, it could be twofold. First, running concessions directly, and that option provides an alternative to operators, investors. They are investing gradually and for a long time, whereas concessionaires using institutional funds money makes it into the project based on one's obligation upon the concession agreement and invests considerable amount in one go, changes the economics of the system, and then in the course of 10 to 15 years has the money paid back. An investor might purchase shares and bonds of the operator and in this way enable the operator to invest considerable sums right away. That's one option. Concession agreement. Since the law on concessions, which has been around for 11 years and which only gave its fruit in terms of investments into the utility segment 2 to 3 years ago, and by the way, that means that for 9 years, 8 to 9 years, it was being fine-tuned. And now that law, several chapters of that law, have all the details of all kinds of tariff components, tariff-related obligations with respect to investors, and so on. Adopting that law and not aligning all the other bylaws and legal documents with that, which limit investors, just cut out this opportunity for investors. Apart from that, for financial investors, apart from that law, there are other legal acts and requirements, say, of the central bank's decisions of the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service. Insofar, those are cutting out those investors from the system of heat supply. Second option is buying shares and bonds of the operating companies. Our analysis demonstrates that we can invest in this or that way, but basically, as of today, all the companies have quite solid level of borrowings, and the return of investments is problematic because it depends on the solvency. The population at large are paying well, but later on those managing companies and those collection centers, which are losing 10 to 15% of the money, make it very difficult to have investments pay back. So the thesis that the system would lead to a breakthrough in terms of investment influx is erroneous. Institutional investors of today Well, we would like to come there, but we cannot insofar. So our proposal, well, yes, of course, we need to support the law. We need to have it implemented, but it should be implemented in conjunction with the bylaws and other legal documents which would enable institutional investors to invest in the framework of that law. If I may, just one small clarification before you run out. You support the law. The chain of the consumer, ETO, and dividends to investors, you're happy with that part of the arrangement. What else should be introduced? What else should be adjusted, so to speak? Regarding the fact that investors would come in and use the concession to input directly into the system, that doesn't work today, doesn't. So what about the second option? The second option, investors always look at the solvency and the return of investments opportunities. Why operators are not investing more? Well, they can only invest what they can. The loan which they can pay back to the banks, if they have that, they will invest. We are after the major influx of the capital and the breakthrough developments in the system. But if investors rely on the payback ability of investments and collectability of funds, which now on the annual basis account for 10 to 15% from the calculated tariff, that destroys any kind of investment model. Therefore, long-term investments are not coming to the operators because operators are not indemnified against failure to collect the funds. Okay. It is apparent that, by and large, in this or that way, all are supportive of the law. Let's go back to Russian constituencies. Let us ask the governor of the Krasnoyarsk Krai, Mr. Viktor Tolokonsky. You have a lot of versatility in the region, and one of the largest regions in the nation, on the one hand. And there are many examples of systems where you have obsolescence in heat supply assets. Are you ready to have in your regions both tariff climb, not the one which is comfortable for consumers, but the one which is required for the upgrading of the system? How do you approach this issue of tariff climb on one hand and the quality and future of the system on the other hand? Thank you, distinguished colleagues. Let me clarify right away. I cannot be regarded as an expert in the discussion because it involves a lot of system-specific competences, and yet I can make some comments. First of all, I am very thankful to Alexander Valentinovich, and I am convinced that the analysis that he presented in the draft law in question is well aligned with the situation we're in now. The law should be adopted, the model should be implemented and further developed. And our region is ready to be one of the pilots and to test, put into work this particular model. The second point, as voiced by previous speakers, about the versatility of the region, that means that there are specific issues here which are not to be found in other constituencies. We are not yet gasified. We do not have natural gas. So should I be the governor of the Novosibirsk Krai, I would have said I am in the system for 20 years and no problems whatsoever. Everything is developing and live and kicking. But it's a bit difficult in this region because there are much fewer technology alternatives than in other regions, and the quality of coals is sometimes challenging. There are environmental issues arising every once in a while, and some other considerations which make the process of development of heat supply system more challenging. The third position I do not believe that we should regard the tariff climb as the backbone of the issue. The tariff level is quite adequate today. It achieves high margin. Now the situation is such that everyone wants to manage, everyone wants to operate, but there are few investments. But that lack of investments, as Vladimir Ilyich mentioned, depends on inefficiency of regulation and on a number of other reasons related to financial market, the market of investments in the Russian Federation. So we should have that in mind too. And the colleague mentioned it here, not just with respect to the ceased system of heat supply, but rather related to regulation in the financial markets. So I would assume that from this point of view, unified heat supply organization would be more efficient. It has its costs at a lower level. Should this model kick off, we will have the same tariff and at the same time much more of the investment component, as we refer to it, which we require for developments. Next bit of the position, I'm convinced that within the scope of the system it is impossible to achieve a quality breakthrough in the investment process if we only rely on the investment component of the tariff. We need inputs and investments just as in any other kind of business. They would, of course, pay back in a longer period of time, but on the other hand, the market furnishes certain guarantees. It is free of fluctuations, so should the regulation exercise be set up right, I'm convinced that investments will flow in. We do not doubt about that, and I'm convinced that time requirements will be less and efficiency will be higher than the electricity market figures, because heat's energy market is more specific, it is more localized, the math is simpler. So another bit of the position which I do not claim to be that of the expert because I'm not very familiar with the particulars of the law. It's just based on the presentation by Mr. Minister, so I might lack some competences.
So I might sound naive, but I start from the standpoint that the heat supply market is not quite a market, even if the good legislation base is there, but the law should provide for quality of contract between constituting entity and heat supply company. So this is the basis of this is the just the rules of the game. Much will depend on the well-structured obligations undertaken and the what responsibility should be taken for the long-term tariff control by the constituting entity and in Krasnoyarsk territory. There are very many convoluted situation. There are many owners of network. They lease long-term lease, and it will be much simpler for us to resolve issues in Krasnoyarsk and in mid-size settlements. It will be much difficult because many things are convoluted and many work should be done to straighten things up. So I haven't seen the text of the bill. There should be a norm. I assume that the government should endorse the standard template contract, which might have some nuances, but this contract should be worked through from a legal standpoint to ensure that none of the parties has any doubt. So if we work within the framework of the contract, everything goes all right. But if we violate, the shop can be set up, it doesn't matter. And we here the risks are much higher. You cannot set up a big chunk, of responsibility. The actions should be very accurate here. So to account for that in the law, I think it's a very important thing to do. And I'm resolute that moving to this model not only makes this thing interesting for investors, but the tariff policy will change. if you stay focused on the tariff for energy generating company, and the tariff is 3 times higher at the makeshift boiler plants, and we invest our budget means, but this is a long-term process, and we require a very active partner, a predictable system, and I think the system would start working right away. And I will make another comment. And in household communal complex, I think this thing is not avoided, but not discussed widely. We will come to the system when the the costs will be brought down, because right now we are paying without accounting for heat and water. There's no counters for heat supply, and I'm living about several months with switching off the heat supply radiators, but I pay the same bills as my neighbor who is heating the street. And so we will come to the system, and we will have to think about that, because bring everything on the tariff won't be possible right away. So we will have to find mechanisms to absorb the shock and the organization to allow to be correct in assessing the perspective, so that we mitigate the risks in bringing down the gross income for consumed communal resource and the normal economy. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. We will get back to the topic of increasing the efficiency of consumer, but not only the system. And let's discuss the issue of the tariff and the payment, the bill. Before we come to this issue, let's stay on the level, on the regional level or municipal, and there's no seats on the panel. Can you tell us about your city and what for you this bill and law allows, and what it restricts? Good morning, Rubtsovsk, city of Rubtsovsk. This is Altai territory, 8,400 hectares, 146,000 population, and coming back, or continuing rather, the topic that we're discussing, the heat supply, what's worth mentioning? Each year in the autumn, we have the big issue, whether the heat will be turned on or not, the hot water will be supplied or not. This is a very crucial issue, because the systems are working that engage in this work are in such a depreciation level that people are feeling unsecure. And they're not sure whether there won't be major incidents in the system. The tariff setting system that we have now is covering, well, it's following the philosophy not to bring the tariff to such high that the population is not crying out, but the level of tariffs is such that to maintain the engineering facilities is not possible. And if we speak about the thing that this situation is staying for 15 years running, the heat supply, well, we had the tractor factory, and there was a boiler plant and a power generation, heat power generation, and this heat power generation facility was supplying the plant, and the balance was sent to the city. Just, the plant was closed down. There's no increase in the consumption. The tariff was not increased abruptly, and the depreciation allocations are not available, and to maintain the heat source is not possible. So this was the situation for a long time. The budget, the municipal, the federal, and we are doing our best to maintain the situation. But 146,000 people and quickly resolve these issues is not possible. So what should we do? Well, investors and the competition among investors, or what facility will be picked up by investors. But we don't have any investors in our city. We're not interesting. The scope of payment to be made by the population less than under 1 billion rubles, and to bring up to standard the whole facility, 2.5 billion rubles are required. If in the past we could allocate 100 million, we would avoid the situation that we're facing now. But we didn't do that. So finally, we spotted an investor, and the investor is ready to engage. And they actualized the heat supply system, developed the feasibility study. And the issue is the following, about the return on investment to be spent. And the spending should be made now, right away. But how to return the money invested? And we have to ensure the mechanism that is there. We have to discuss the mechanism, and there should be a law that provides the guarantees to return the money invested within 12 to 15 years. And alternative boiler plant. And I think this is the solution of the issue that we're discussing, that we can invest right now the big chunk of money into the power generation complex and the guarantee to get the payback of the money invested. There are no other issues for such a town as Rubtsovsk. We don't have, and the understanding that we're moving in the wrong way is here. So my request is to finalize the alternative boiler plant to this final point, and to consider Rubtsovsk and Altai territory as a pilot project, because we don't have other option for the time being. Thank you. Thank you. And I would ask Alexander Valentinovich, in your presentation, you said that there are a sufficient number of leverages to control the situation, and of course this is obvious. But what about flexibility? In heat supply system, the people have decided that there investments are there, but the life changes every day, and maybe the just developers won't come, and other changes might happen. So the company, ETO or network company, that they should maneuver because they decide that they will engage into other investment projects. So what should be done that inspectors come to there and they just, we benchmark your promises and what we engaged right now. You are not keeping up to the word. Either enough flexibility, and if not, how to ensure that the flexibility there. I think you just answered your question. The flexibility should be there. In any case, this should be just rigorous model within the framework of which you cannot adjust your activities. This is the new model. This requires testing, validation, and development of the instruments that would allow be flexible using the model. I should tell that the interaction between inside ETO will be set up on the heat supply system to be endorsed by the municipalities, by the Ministry for Big Cities, which provides for mechanisms of investing to optimize the heat supply system and to increase its efficiency. This is the first thing. And the second is the heat supply system, as far as I know, should be kept actualized on an annual basis. So within the framework of effective legislation, this model allows for adjusting investment. And Victor touched on the following. It's important that the system of relations should be controlled by a contract between municipality and the ETO. And in this contract should provide for adjusting the approach based on a mutual agreement, of course. It wouldn't be a situation that ETO or investor unilaterally makes decision on adjusting the program that had been agreed. There should be a mechanism developed that the decision should be taken on a consensus basis. Let's address the members of our round table that are having international experience, and I'd like to ask the Fortum company, one of the companies that has been working in this market for quite a long time, and it's quite successful in its activity, in Chelyabinsk in particular. And I'd like to ask to what extent you feel that the new model can influence the increase in efficiency of the whole system, including the consumer, including the efficiency of heating of the buildings of the owners who are paying for that. And I'd like to take on the headsets, because Mr. Reti will be so quick answering the question that you won't have a chance to hear it.
As a typical Finn, I start very rapidly, as you know. Let me first thank you for the possibility to participate in this panel, because it's for a company like Fortum that has heavily invested in Russia. It's important to be part of the discussions. And when you ask me, do I believe that changes are going to make a good result? Yes, I do. And the conclusion I can draw from the discussion this far is that, what's a major conclusion I can draw from the discussion, also from the experience of Fortum, is that district heating is a fundamental branch of Russia's housing and utility sector, which is in a very heavy need of market reforms. And this reform has to be executed as rapidly as possible. When Mr. Razemski mentioned the losses in heat systems, starting from heat sources, going to transport, and at the end to the in-building heat systems in individual houses, are huge. And who is paying the bill? It's not the companies or the ones who are transporting the heat, it's the customers. So in this respect, the reform is extremely very much needed. Each year we postpone the reform, it will become more and more difficult and more expensive to execute the reform and to modernize the district heating infrastructure. We are in Fortum very grateful for the Ministry of Energy, and especially for the efforts made by Minister Alexander Novak and Deputy Minister Vyacheslav Kravchenko to submit the heat reform draft legislation to Duma. And hopefully, this is our hope also, the reform will take place as soon as possible and the framework is to be adopted also.
Спасибо. Спасибо вам большое. Я хотел также представить...
Thank you very much. And I'd like to introduce Anton Kruser, who is engaged for many years into centralized heat supply system, but from the standpoint of engineer of a supplier on the comprehensive supply, and he is keeping in mind the increase in efficiency. So for you, to what extent you see the potential, and where specifically through this chain from generating company to the end user? So where you see the potential of increase of efficiency, and in what manner you would start work with the system to increase the efficiency of the system?
For me to be here tonight, today, to join you on this panel. And I think to the question, I think the efficiency gains are basically from the end consumer to the full system. So I think in every part of the system, you will find energy savings. Yeah? And of course, it's always the question, which should be targeted first and which should be second. And this goes, of course, depending on the individual system, and you cannot make a general answer to that. District heating is the most beneficial system for an urban area. And it has many stakeholders, and these stakeholders need in any regulatory to be, so to say, taken into account. And we have talked today about many of these stakeholders, and I think they have different interests from the operator, the city government, the end consumer, and the regulatory bodies, of course. And most important is that the interests of these different stakeholders are aligned. Yeah? Because at the end of the day, you want to achieve a long-term positive investment climate, and on the other hand, you like to have affordable prices for the end users. So I think this needs to be in play, and this gives also a little bit an answer, so to say, where investments need to start. I think you need to start investments where you can see benefits for all stakeholders and not only for one. Yeah? From a commercial point of view, in this, it's also important to look at not only the pure heating price and tariffs, but also on the environment, which is mandatory connections, which is connection fees, because they play a role. And you can play with this, and this is getting, even in Europe, much more popular to look at mandatory connections, even in Germany, which this is, have been very resistant to this. But as this is the most preferable system, district heating, things seem differently. And connection is important because district heating gains a lot with scalability. So if you're an investor and you can densify the network, you will get gains. And on the other hand, the end users will get gains because the tariffs can be lower. So this needs to flow together. And what had been called in the reform as the alternate boiler station in your design, I think is a very good idea. Because you need to have one or the other way of an indicator for price. And I think we have in Europe same models in different countries, different models, but from cost plus, also with maximum prices. And there was also the question about individual pricing and allocation pricing. I think our rule of thumb is that it would be good to have around 70 to 80% pricing based on real consumption and 20 to 30% on allocation, fixed allocation within the multifamily house building. You have this discussion. So who is heating and who is turning off the radiator? Then you have this discussion. It's important to address. And I think when you look at the alternate boilers, you should also not forget that maybe today some of these alternate boilers are oversized in capacity. And if you come now with investment and do something, you will get a lot of efficiency. And maybe you need a much smaller capacity. And by that, I think a lot of cost can be saved. Yeah? And when we look then for the overall point of view, then I think you need also to ensure that you have bodies and regulator bodies where consumer complaints can be handled in a structured way, so consumer and end users is not getting lost. And I think you have a good opportunity here with this reform to build also a very strong social contract between all the stakeholders and really carrying the reform forward. I think on the beginning it's very important that all stakeholders are behind this reform to make it a success. And I think what I've heard today looks very positive, and I'm very optimistic that you can make, that you can achieve this. Yeah. And I think at the end, it's also important not to forget the end user totally. We always talk on the professionals, and end users are not in the room, but the end user has, of course, two interests. One is having, so to say, of course, an affordable price, but also in technology, because he likes to control his room in a comfortable way, easy, and also having an overview about the bill, what he will get at the end of the month. Yeah? So I think it's important to have this in play and to connect it. Because if you connect it, these technologies, then the operator gets also benefit. So you see some markets where the return temperature is part of the tariff setting. And this, of course, if a lower return temperature is achieved, is also benefit for the operator. And here again, we come to the point, but from the question on the beginning, is the possibility to have building stations or substations in a building to manage the building better, gives the benefit to the operator with lower return temperature, and at the same time to enhance the comfort for the end users. By this, I like to close, and I'd like to say thank you very much for having the opportunity here to join. And I think overall the most important is for sure a very positive investment climate and affordable prices for the society. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое, господин Колер. Работа действительно.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koller, for your inputs. Indeed, there is a lot of versatility and details. We have the time for perhaps just one more question or comment. Since we are talking consumers and efficiency for consumers, I would like to ask Mr. Makrushin, because this is exactly his domain, working with consumers. Would we be able to enhance efficiency for them as the group of market players? Your considerations regarding that? Well, I believe that it is key within the scope of the reform taking place, because it makes no sense investing in the generation and new networks if we are not more efficient with consumption. What we have now is a very high level of consumption, which is 2.5 times higher than that in Europe, low tariff, and problems with collection. And I think that if we do not pay great attention to that, we will fail with efficiency. So to put it roughly, the goal is to cut by the factor of 2 the consumption and increase the tariff by the same factor, and to make sure consumer doesn't suffer. If we are not successful with that, we will end up with a situation in water supply domain whereby 70% of Vodokanal organizations in Russia are running their business in the red. So the model proposed should be fine-tuned from the point of view of taking into account the outputs related to consumption and launch the projects which were mentioned by the President of Tatarstan. If we fix the tariffs, we invest in the ETP, we cut consumption, and we have double costs in the investment side and lack of efficiency. So we need to take that into account within the model so that we have the opportunity to raise tariffs. And briefly, one more comment on the thesis which has been invoked here on the need to liberalize relations between the Unified Heat Supply Organization and others in the markets. Now we come across a very serious issue, that is the loss of commercial losses of heat energy. The growth of commercial losses of heat energy, because the function previously assigned to the network organization for commercial metering is now with the ETO, but the responsibility remained in the same source. From that point of view, when we let it loose and we fail to regulate, and the companies are basically dividing one the same pie, it is difficult for them to agree. So relations between the company and the market should be strictly regulated by the legislation and not let it run loose. Otherwise, the conflicts which might arise might undermine the reform. Okay, then a very brief question, counter question. Do you believe that the law basically lets those relations be regulated at the level of the Unified Heat Supply Organization, making it its problem now? I believe that it might provoke such a great number of conflicts, which will have a major negative impact on the reform outputs at large. So those relations, I guess, should be strictly regulated, just as the case in the electricity domain. So just 2 remarks, and we are through with the time.
Use a couple of words about what we as foreign investors, what we need to be able to invest in Russia. And that's a very important issue in my thinking. I have 4 points on that one, and let me be very brief with those. First, we need, as mentioned already here earlier, sustainable long-term rules which are mandatory for all parties involved. That's very clear need for us. And a good example here is capacity supply agreement, which works perfectly. It's a brand in a way at the moment, and it has brought 1.5 trillion rubles into electricity generation and built over 25 gigawatts of modern capacity in Russia. So that's a very good model. Second, mentioned already here earlier by the investors, is that we need a fair return of capital invested. Without that return, our owners will say no. So we need to pay our bill to our shareholders too. And acceptable guarantees for the return investments can be established by government formula on the reference heat price. I would say, let's say 10 years, like we have in capacity supply agreement. Third point is that foreign investors need a set of very transparent rules to equally participate in the sector with other players. And we don't feel that today that we have this equality in some cases. There is no mandatory requirement to regulators to make public in unified format the underlying data for tariff setting. That's one of the issues. And there are similar heat-only boilers close to each other in one city, and the price difference can be 2 to 3 times. This should be fixed. This is not an issue that can be in the future. The fourth one is a very simple one, and as a typical Finn, I will give a simple answer to that one. Laws should be obeyed. And our customers, the municipal heat network, heat transport companies, are accumulating at the moment multi-billion ruble debts. And the legal battles for our money can last for a long time, and they're very costly, and the outcome is not obvious always. Debt collection has become an operational process, and this should not be the case. This should be also solved. One more very strange for foreign investor example is the heat scheme adaptation. I'm sorry to say, but in Chelyabinsk, it's still not adapted. And it should have been years ago by the law. So this is one of the issues we need to go forward. In conclusion, I would like to say that district heat comprehensive reforms are much needed. And it's a win-win situation for foreign investors, for the consumers, and for Russia as a whole. Thank you.
Спасибо вам большое. И слово заключительное.
Thank you very much indeed. And the closing remarks by Mr. Minister. Thanks a lot. Let me once again to express my gratitude to all the participants of this panel discussion. Our purpose was to look at the degree of readiness to endorse the new model. And based on what I'm hearing here today from governors, investors, experts in the industry, and our colleagues from other federal authorities, I would side with Nikolai Podguzov. There is no other way. Unfortunately, we're stuck in the reform of heat supply, and we're now closing 2016 soon, and the system of relations is still obsolete and outdated. In many industries, we have been running reforms which are yielding their fruit, such as we have in the electricity supply domain. If we are not to do that in the heat supply sector, we will pay more. The system will become obsolete, and should assets fail, we would incur major costs. So there is great room for improvement and the great potential for the model implementation. We have a lot to do in terms of energy efficiency. We are ranking very low in terms of losses in the utility segment, and it's closely linked with investments. We have been talking at length about raising tariffs. I would not like to emphasize that the situation in constituencies of Russia is very different, and the difference between the centralized tariffs and the local tariffs are great. So we need just to enhance the efficiency of available system of heat supply. So there is no other way. The money is there, as we have discovered today, and we need to put in place the mechanism which would channel the money into the industry. A few words about the procedures around the law. We have been running quite heated discussions around the law. And our position used to be very strict that we should do that just as we did in the electricity segment, starting from the first month of some years, so that everyone would switch to the new model. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to make our stand. The law now is more flexible. It's soft in terms of requirements, and the constituencies would make their own decisions. And Viktor Alexandrovich and Mr. President Minnikhanov cited the positive cases accumulated through pilots that will allow all the municipalities and constituencies of Russia to use best practices and switch to the new model. We have been searching at length as to the best option to pursue in the industry, and I guess that insofar that's the only tool, the only option which might bring in investments and enhance the efficiency of the industry at large. Thank you all very much once again, and we will, of course, use your comments and proposals when we deal with the law in the State Duma and working with investors, municipalities, and the regions. We are closing this discussion now, and I thank you all very much.
Thank you.